Admit.
Ooh. Can you go to the front, please, so I can record you?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody hear me now? On behalf of the Education Committee, I especially want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I think this is really one of the most important sessions, for the lack of a better word, but one that I know will be memorable to us all in many ways. What we're going to hear tonight is one of the reasons that I came and joined BCOC, and I think that may be the case for some other folks that are here tonight too. So thank you for being here and hearing the stories of the people who helped to make this possible. I want first to, in terms of introducing the program tonight, I want to thank Cindy Ponder for making it possible, in that she, as part of all the responsibilities that Cindy took on for us this past year, she's responsible for planning and putting in place all the programs for tonight. So I especially want to thank you, Cindy, for making this possible. And now, of course, a special thanks to our very special panel. I really am looking forward to hearing the facts given by our resident historian, Dennis, and the wonderful members of the panel that will be joining us, Sarah and Larry. Where's Larry? Larry and Ellen. Glad you could be with us tonight too, Ellen. So it's all yours, and thank you again for tonight.
We are streaming tonight, so if we give you a chance to say anything, please come to a mic. Or we'll have some mics roaming around. We're also recording for members who weren't able to be here tonight, who may want to watch the program later. The agenda for tonight is I will begin with some history information. Sarah will talk about her experience as being pastor here during a lot of what was going on. And then Ellen and Larry will talk about their experience as members, about how we experienced becoming affirming and welcoming at Baptist Church of the Covenant. I'm going to start with a history that I deem to be 34 years, actually, beginning in 1984 when the AIDS epidemic really showed its head in Birmingham, and then ending in 2017 when we actually formed a partnership with AWAB. And that was in 2017 when it first showed up in our budget. The pastors, this is through 3 pastorates. Dan Ivins was here at 1984 through 1992, Roger Lovett 1992 through 2000, and then Sarah Shelton 2000 to 2019. Okay, I'm going to go through a timeline pretty fast, just give you some facts about what I think were relevant events that happened during this time. 1984, AIDS was first diagnosed in the U.S. in 81 and appeared in Birmingham in 84. Birmingham doctors were seeing extremely ill patients whose families refused to give them support. A public health doctor and also BCOC member, Michael Fleener, urged Dan Ivins to begin a ministry to persons affected by AIDS. Ivins hesitated because most people associated with AIDS were associated with homosexuality, and that was an issue he was not eager to address. 1986, Metro Community Church, a congregation of gays, lesbians, and transgendered persons, asked to lease our space for their weekly services. At a monthly meeting, we discussed this. The majority was in favor, but the opposition was so adamantly opposed that the request was tabled. In the meantime, Metro Community Church found another place to meet. But Cindy Ponder loaned her voice then to what Michael Fleener was advocating for. Dan Ivins did invite Bill Amos, a pastor in Florida at a church who was ministering to people with AIDS, to speak on a Wednesday night. In 1989, Ivins invited Amos to come again. He met with the Community Missions Committee. Beginning in 1989 and continuing for several years, BCOC filled and decorated Christmas baskets for AIDS patients. BCO members volunteered at Baby's Place, which is a daycare center for babies with AIDS. BCOC members visited with people living with AIDS. We hosted a Christmas lunch for children with AIDS group. There were children getting AIDS in various ways, and so there was a group of children with AIDS who were being ministered to. The AIDS Memorial Quilt was begun in 1987, actually conceived in 1985, but begun in 1987. It was promoted by the Names Foundation, Project Foundation. The quilt was composed of thousands of panels, each with the name of someone who had died of AIDS or AIDS complications. Just for curiosity, that quilt does still exist, and it currently resides in San Francisco. I forget the exact location, but it is in San Francisco. It's cared for by a group in San Francisco. It currently has, I think, about 50,000 panels, representing about 110,000 people. It's 1.3 million square feet, and it weighs 54 tons. So it's grown considerably since we first saw it in the early 80s. The first time we saw it, it came through town, and Bill Whisenant had a panel on there. He'd been a charter member at Covenant, and he had a panel on there at that time. And each panel is 3 foot by 6 foot. That's about the size of a grave, and the reason they did that was, the reason the quilt was started was because many people with AIDS were not given funeral and burial rights because people are so afraid of the disease. So anyway, we had some involvement with that as well. BCOC members assisted with displaying the AIDS Memorial Quilt. That's what I said when we saw it. Bill Whisenant's panel was on there. Pastor Lovett invited speakers for 3 consecutive Wednesday evenings to address the subject of AIDS. Kevin Stevens, who had been in Birmingham, moved back to Birmingham from California. He had a terminal case of AIDS. Weeks before his death, his Sunday school class at Covenant conducted their class and held communion in his room. BCOC members delivered meals on wheels to homes of AIDS patients where others would not go. That literally was the case, that there was a Meals on Wheels program, but they would not go to homes with people with AIDS. People from Covenant volunteered. I remember Peggy Hall, I think, was one of those. We also participated in renovating and furnishing a home for a person living with AIDS. Lovett was elected to the board of the AIDS Task Force of Alabama and spoke on AIDS Comes to Church at the 1994 State Symposium. We hosted World AIDS Day in our new sanctuary. I've told people at the church, if you hear somebody talking about our sanctuary, which we built in 1995, as the new building, you know they're a charter member, you know. But at that time, it was new. We had 40 members who participated in the Alabama AIDS Walk during that time. A community memorial service for children who had died of AIDS was held at Covenant, and Covenant member Malcolm Marler trained and organized AIDS care teams here at Covenant. The AIDS quilt returned to Birmingham in 1997 with a panel added for Kevin Stevens by his family, who had become members at Covenant. Ministry to person with AIDS, HIV and AIDS, had grown from Christmas baskets to Christmas boxes, with almost 2 truckloads of boxes we delivered in 1998. BCOC members continued to volunteer at Baby's Place when the daycare center lost its space. Moving the nursery to BCOC was considered, but many church members were considered that the infected infants would spread the disease and might infect our own children, so we did not do that. Several people joined Covenant because of our ministries for people living with AIDS. 1998 continued. Let's see, Birmingham AIDS Outreach thanked Covenant for allowing the use of our fellowship hall for a Christmas dinner for its clients. For many of the participants, this was the first time a church had welcomed them. Covenant welcomed people with AIDS and their families into membership and gave them opportunities to serve in church organizations. This made some Covenant members uncomfortable, caused some concern that Covenant would become a gay church. Other members were glad to welcome them, and others that other people considered unacceptable. 1988, we were still struggling with how we should respond, so Roger Lovett invited Malcolm Marler to lead Covenant in a study of what the Bible says about homosexuality. In my view, that's a dangerous approach, but because you can prove anything, by selecting Scripture. Anyway, we did that. The next week, Malcolm led a panel discussion of non-BCOC members who told their own personal experiences, discovering that they or a member of their family were homosexual. Both sessions ended in heated discussions that did not end in consensus, and we even lost some members at the church at that time. So while we had a lot of positive things going on during this time, there were some bumps in the road as well. 1998, the Alabama Marriage Protection Act was passed by the Alabama legislature. It defined marriage as between one man and one woman. It prohibited issuance of marriage license to same-sex couples, prohibited recognition of marriages or unions of same-sex couples that came from outside of Alabama. In 1999, the AIDS Walk became an annual BCOC ministry. 2000, Sarah Shelton was called as interim pastor to lead BCOC Covenant through an intentional interim with a focus on healing and reconciliation, and she did an outstanding job. 2001, a transition team offered several recommendations, including that Covenant undertake an intentional learning process concerning individuals of same-sex orientation. 2006, Amendment 774, the Alabama Sanctity of Marriage Amendment, approved by voters via referendum. It prevented marriages of same-sex couples and recognition of unions of same-sex couples, and prevented issuing licenses to same-sex couples. It was codified in the state constitution. It codified the ban on marriage of same-sex couples, 2006. 2014 and 15, there were bills introduced to repeal Amendment 774, but they failed to pass. 2015, the federal judge ruled that Alabama's ban on marriage of same-sex couples was unconstitutional under the U.S. Constitution's guarantee of due process and equal protection. The U.S. Supreme Court held that bans on marriage of same-sex couples was unconstitutional nationwide, requiring states to license and recognize marriages of same-sex couples. So 2015, it finally became law in Alabama. 2017, after some debate, AWAB did become the Association of Affirming and Welcoming Baptists, did become a ministry partner with Covenant, and it's included in our annual budget. Does anybody know how many Alabama churches are AWAB associated? 3. Us and Southside. And a church that's fairly new, it looks like to me, it's, let's see if I can remember the name of it. It's the Tabernacle Fellowship of Birmingham. It looks like it's an African-American church. It looks like it's pretty small, started in 2024. So really, it's us and Southside. 2019, the Alabama legislature passed a bill to change marriage licensing procedures. Instead of requiring probate judges to issue marriage licenses, couples will use an affidavit and then record the marriage certificate, in part to accommodate probate judges who refused to issue licenses under their religious objections. Today, the state bans on marriages of same-sex couples in Alabama remain on the books, but are unenforceable because of the federal constitutional requirement. So that was a quick run through a history. I think you see many good points. Covenant was kind of living up to its reputation at the time of breaking down barriers. There were some bumps along the way, but I think a pretty good history. I'd like for Sarah Shelton to come now and talk about her time as pastor here.
Okay, so what I was told was I'm supposed to talk about how weddings of same-sex couples came to Covenant? Okay, because there's lots of other stuff too. Let's just have a tell-all, won't we? As in all things, issues of the church are not without context. It is my experience that one decision is rarely made without the input and outcome of multiple decisions. So it is true that events and conversations leading up to our decision regarding weddings of a same-sex couple began early. And there are memories that are still capable of evoking hurt. So in listening and in discussing, please be sensitive. Rather than wade through all the precursors, I will give a brief synopsis, offer some references, and know that I have permission to use specific names that are given. Okay. People's Exhibit A and People's Exhibit B are sermons from October 17, 2004 and April 24, 2016 that reference an encounter with the Birmingham Baptist Association. They called our integrity into question because we allowed LGBTQ persons to become members. It was one of many intimidating and infuriating encounters for me. It was 2009 when Stevie Hoven and Tracy Wade asked permission to be married in the sanctuary. I took their request to the Council on Mission, and while I do not remember who was serving, I do remember that Paul Hall answered the request. The wedding of a same-sex couple is against the law in Alabama, and we certainly do not want to do anything illegal in our sanctuary, is what he said. There was consensus around the table, so it was up to me to tell the couple that we could not do it, but that I did know an ordained chaplain who might have the heart to hear their request. So a church member offered his home, and Bart Grooms officiated. Word circulated within the congregation, so it wasn't too long before 3 separate members made 3 different appointments with me in my office. And in their own way, they each said the same thing. If I, as pastor of Baptist Church of the Covenant, were to officiate or even attend a wedding of a same-sex couple, they would pull their support. And if I officiated a wedding of a same-sex couple in our sanctuary, then they and their families would leave the church. Valerie and I huddled up in my study. The question we debated was, how does one continue to bring a congregation together with such threats holding the pastor hostage? We knew the inevitability, that weddings were inevitable of same-sex couples. And how could we handle this without drawing a line in the sand and forcing a choice that would divide the congregation? Without wavering, Valerie made the observation that those statements had not been made to her, so she felt like she was a free agent. So from that point forward, I referred all requests to Valerie. People's Exhibit C is an email from Alan Burton, who recounts a lot of the marriages that she and Alan participated. It included his presence on the steps of City Hall the day that marriage licenses were made legal in the state of Alabama. I was and am still grateful for Valerie's support and courage, but I would be dishonest if I did not admit to you my sadness at not being with my people at such moments of celebration. About the best I could do was send a prepared prayer of blessing for Valerie or another attending officiant to read. So then came along Ann Wade and Ellen Dossett. As I recall, you were going to Washington, D.C. for a legal marriage complete with license. But because of their deep connection with Baptist Church of the Covenant and the larger community of Birmingham, they wanted to have a ceremony of lifelong commitment in our sanctuary. I knew in my heart, regardless of what we called it, it would be viewed as a wedding of a same-sex couple. So again, I go to the Council on Mission. Bill Caron was the chair, and when I presented Ann and Ellen's request, he was shocked. He thought these services were already taking place and found it hard to believe that no wedding of a same-sex couple had ever occurred at Baptist Church of the Covenant. So we studied. We studied the Constitution and bylaws. We studied the personal and corporate commitments. We studied the wedding policies. And none of these specifically said yes. But more importantly, they did not say no. They were either silent or gloriously ambiguous. And Bill said, "I do not see a need for this to be a vote that the church has to make. We can just report our findings after studying the church documents, and we will do this at the next business meeting." I left knowing I had two important things to do before that business meeting. I held separate appointments with each of the three individuals mentioned earlier, and again, each meeting was almost identical. Individually, they came into my office and sat down. I referenced our previous conversations regarding the weddings of same-sex couples, and then I said, "I think I have changed my mind about this and wondered if your mind has changed too." Without fail, they answered, "I don't know that my mind has completely changed, but I will follow your leadership on this matter." Yes. The other thing I needed to do was to prepare the congregation, and on August 25th, I preached People's Exhibit D. Parts of this, I think, are going to go up there if you can listen and read at the same time. The Wednesday night business meeting arrived and the fellowship hall was packed. When I saw that all three of my friends were present, my heart sank. I worried that we were going to have one of Covenant's famous business meetings. Bill Caron made the Council on Mission report, and when he said there is nothing for us to vote on, the oxygen went out of the room. Most present had come for a fight, and they were quick to express their dismay. At last, Joe Dean stood and said, "Well, why don't we do this? Everyone who is supportive of our wedding policies as they are, will you please stand?" And I stood. It was the only business meeting vote I have ever participated in to the best of my knowledge, and I was not alone in standing. What I remember is that every person in the room stood, including the three office visitors. Ann and Ellen's ceremony of a lifelong commitment was held in the sanctuary of Baptist Church of the Covenant in December of 2013. Now there's one more story and I will be done. Global CBF has a discriminatory hiring policy regarding LGBTQ. There was such dissension about it, they developed the Illumination Committee to gather input from local churches. Doug Dortch, then pastor of Mountain Brook Baptist Church, was the chair of the Illumination Committee, and he invited all of the Alabama CBF pastors to come to Mountain Brook Baptist for discussion. I learned early on not to go to meetings like this alone, so Fisher Humphreys and Frank McCrory were my escorts. We listened to every pastor report what he had done. My report was dramatically different as I shared that I didn't move this congregation forward. This congregation moved me forward. The pastor of First Baptist Church Huntsville stood to say that the LGBTQ community, they are welcome to join our church. They are welcome to attend our church, but they could not teach Sunday school. They could not serve as a deacon. They could not be ordained. They could not serve on a committee. They could not. At this point, Frank leaned over and asked Fisher and me, then why would I want to be a member of his church? I think that's the larger question we need to be asking ourselves. The answer is simple, but it is oh so hard to do. So hear the words of Jesus. We are to love one another as Christ loved us. This is the next one I think I want to read. Well, what do I do? Okay, this is from People's Exhibit D. The text of the sermon was about Jesus calling the Pharisees a hypocrite, and I put myself in that category because I welcome them into church membership, I baptize them in the waters, I serve them communion, I dedicate their babies, I appoint and ordain them to positions of leadership. I receive their tithes and offerings, I offer prayers beside their sick beds and words of remembrance at their funerals. But what I have not done, what we have not done, is honor their vows of covenantal relationship by permitting commitment services in the very place that they call their church home.
Before I start my very well-prepared notes here, I want to talk to you about Ann a minute. She is very sorry she can't be here. It's just killing her, but she can't. She is strictly confined for 3 months. So, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about Ann. She was raised a Methodist, and she was from Montgomery, and she attended the first church of Montgomery, which if you have seen it, it looks a lot like the Duke Chapel. It is unbelievable. So that was her church history. When we came back to Covenant after 9/11 is when we started coming back, after having lived in Seattle. We were taken by Sarah's sermons, and she had just become our interim pastor. And I, having been the daughter of a Baptist preacher, had pretty much said I wouldn't ever want to hear another sermon as long as I lived, but I changed my mind after hearing Sarah. So we, we started coming, and Ann realized that she wanted to join the church. And I kind of pushed her on that before she made up her mind. And I would say to her, Ann, we're completely accepted here. Emmy is completely accepted here. Our family is completely accepted here. There's no real reason for you not to. And she said, well, Ellen, I have gone home and told my mother I'm a lesbian. I cannot go home and tell her I'm a Baptist. That's Ann. But we all survived. Her mother took to her bed for a few weeks, but then Ann and I had been together approximately 26 years when Section 3 of the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, was struck down, legalizing same-sex marriage nationally in 2013. We were elated beyond words. At the lake with longtime friends from North Carolina that day, we celebrated in disbelief. I remember distinctly hearing the words we'd been waiting for so long, the law passed. This was, and I also do remember a cartoon from the New Yorker, which I'm sure some of you heard, is of a husband and wife sitting in their living room watching TV, and they heard the news about this law passing, and the wife looked to her husband and said, those poor gay people have suffered enough. So after this major victory sank in, Ann and I began talking about whether we would actually get married or not. We said things like, we've been together 26 years. It won't really make any difference. It's just a piece of paper. We clearly are committed to one another for life. And these were all true, and we believed them totally. But there was this nagging thought in my mind. We have worked so hard for full acceptance in this country. People have sacrificed and died for standing up for the right to be fully American with all rights and privileges. We want things to change in this country of ours. I also thought about the civil rights movement, which I witnessed myself in the 60s from Samford University. I remember feeling shame then and even to this day that I was not more actively involved in that movement. And I remember thinking how much I hoped that those people who had not been allowed to vote before would actually take advantage of that right. I felt the same way about the right to marry. Why work so hard and believe in equality's strong, active campaign to get this law passed and not then act on it? I remember thinking, yes, it would make a difference for all of us then and all of us yet to come who deserve these rights. However, the Defense of Marriage Act still allowed states to determine whether the same-sex marriages in their state were legal. I know you wonder what Alabama did. They did not agree for that, for there to be legal marriages of same-sex couples. So we flew to Washington, D.C. in October of 2013, and Emmy flew from Asheville to join us. Emmy's our daughter, for those of you who might not know. She flew from college and met us there. And Emmy's comment to us when we told her we were getting married was, "Thank goodness, I won't be a bastard anymore." Her words, not mine. We were legally married in a judge's chambers in the Superior Court of the District of Columbus, on October 24th, 2013. That was a moving and monumental experience, to be sure, but we were all sad that we couldn't share it with our family and friends. That desire to have a ceremony in our church where our birth families and chosen families and friends could celebrate with us grew stronger and stronger. But we knew that Covenant had a policy of no same-sex marriages in our church, and it was against the law in Alabama. We were really struggling and decided to go to Pastor Sarah and talk with her about it. In her typical manner, she listened carefully and was 100% supportive of us, but she said she'd have to take our request to the Committee on Ministry. We waited anxiously for their reply, and when it came to us, as I understand it from that committee, it was a big unanimous yes. So we could have our ceremony of commitment. Sarah named it. I really did want to put marriage on that bulletin, but Sarah named it a celebration of lifelong commitment. I will say that I've never felt happier or prouder or more included than I did that day. We had the ceremony at the church, then we partied hearty when many of you were there at our reception, and our respective families and friends from all over the country came, and this was the first time after 26 years of Ann and me being together that our families had actually met.
Wow.
As we know, progress and change are ongoing processes, and I love it that we are a faith community committed to never giving up on one another and never giving up on what we hold so dearly in our hearts.
It's good to be married to someone that can write. Mark couldn't be here tonight because even though he's retired from working in a church all the time, he volunteered for a gig this Sunday, and he had to go to their choir practice. He said, "You'll be fine. Let me write a few things down." So this is in me talking. We officially met at a dinner party hosted by church member William Winslet. His name keeps coming up. Have you noticed? It was for the Birmingham AIDS Outreach, BAO, Valentine dying in February of 2004. Now, Mark had been married for 23 years, and he had 2 great sons. So I didn't come along and bust up a marriage. So my conscience was clear, mostly. There were simultaneously 100 dinner parties over the city. I brought along Janet, who was one of my bosses. Now, y'all, let me set this scene. We're driving down to work play. Janet has a red Corvette. We're driving. I'm driving. Mark thought we were a couple. Bless his heart. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool? I knew he was going. I was interested in him because he was playing the piano when I got there, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. He's very talented. So when we come up to the intersection to then turn into the parking lot, and we're sitting there in that red Corvette, he walked across the sidewalk, and I'm like, yes, this might work out. So after the dinner party, all of the 100 dinner parties were to convene at Workplay, which I told you about, for dessert, champagne, and a silent auction. I asked my friend, former church member Chuck Green, if he would ask Mark David for his phone number so I could call him. Because we were both kind of like, we're done with men. I wanted to be like, I don't know, go to I don't know, someplace that it was just awful. He felt the same way, just away from, like not a commune, what do you call it? A convent, yeah. So anyway, thankfully we didn't, a monastery, that's it. We didn't do that. I am off my script. So, pardon? Read the words. Okay, yeah, I know. You got somewhere to be, John. I know. Okay. So anyway, we exchanged numbers. We started seeing each other. He had moved out of the house. He had a friend that was letting him live in her house. She was selling it. And I said, well, why don't you move in with me? We've been dating 6 months. And he goes, what are we going to do? My family, my boys. And I said, we will be ourselves. And they will come to love us. And it all worked out. We now have 2 daughters-in-law and 4 grandchildren. So I'm a grateful fella. Let me think. Okay, we both sang in the choir for 6 years, so he was not working at another church. He was also our interim choir director before Dan came. So this past August 17th, he retired and is back at BCOC, but nobody's to push him. He's his own person, even though that's not in my nature, but I'm letting him do what he wants to when he wants to. Pray for me. So we got engaged at the beach retreat. You want to go sit over there? Yeah. You're a distraction. So, okay, when we first started dating, we went to Atlanta to see some friends of his. And I said, let's get rings. And we went to a jewelry store and bought these rings. So we had those for several years, and I'm thinking, okay, the boys had both gotten married, and I think we should get married. And we could, because this was 2018. So I thought, I can't ask him. I said, can I borrow your ring for a minute? That wouldn't work. We're going to the beach retreat. So I went to the store and bought him a watch, because Seventh-day Adventists give each other watches, and I had a coworker who was Seventh-day Adventist, so I was aware of that history. So I thought, I'll buy him a watch. So we get to the beach, we have dinner. I'm a little anxious because I know what I'm going to do. I said, let's go walk down to the beach. I'm tired. I want to go to bed. I said, just please, go with me. And we're starting to walk down to the beach, and he goes, I've got my wallet and my phone with me. I said, I'm not going to try to drown you. I said, and we get down to the beach, and it's about, 7 o'clock. The The sun's setting. It's just gorgeous. And I said, please turn around. And he slowly turns around. And then I dropped down to one knee. And I pulled the watch out. And he was speechless. And he just stood there after I asked him. And I said, say something. You know, yes, no, let me think about it. He finally nodded. So then we went back up to the beach retreat where everybody was. And they didn't know what we were doing. And he says, I'm going to bed. I said, okay, go. Our room was right there by everybody. So he goes to bed, shuts the door. He didn't lock the door. So I start telling, like I told Valerie, and I told her about the watch, and she goes, oh, Larry, that's so symbolic. And all this kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, I know. Yeah. I hadn't thought about all that. So then they're like, where is he? Oh, he's in the room. Well, people started going in the room. Matt Ponder jumped up and down on the bed. He finally shooed him out and locked the door. So we're going to get married. And then William and Denise Persall were getting married. And my idea was, even though I'm an extrovert, we're just going to have a simple ceremony, just a few people, no big deal. You know, the boys had nice services and everything. I thought, I just want to do this. Well, we were in Denise and William's service, and we had coats and ties on. So that next Sunday, Larry goes, oh, y'all look so good in a coat and tie. So Mark goes, well, maybe we should wear coats and ties. I'm like, okay, whatever you want to do. Well, then the mention of a tux came up. And I was like, now being cheap, I said, I've got one. He goes, no. I mean like tuxes with tails. I'm like, are you kidding me? He said, no. And as we kept talking, and we were talking to Pastor Sarah, well, this little 10 people thing grew to almost 200. So, and I was nervous. And she says, y'all are going to be okay. I got you. And Ricky Strickland was my best man, and Rick Self was Mark's best man. And we got up there and we sang Joyful, 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 We Adore Thee as a congregational hymn. You know, the music, and Dan was playing that music and stuff. That was real important to him. And I'm like, okay, you know. So after, and I guess it's okay to say this. In the Baptist church, you can't have alcohol, okay? So we couldn't have our reception here because he wanted to have wine. So we went to a little Methodist church in Shelby County that his great-grandfather had started, a little cute little house, but it had a neat little fellowship hall. Well, after we did it here, and Pastor Sarah said, after we did our vows, she said, do you remember what you said? Seal the deal. So we had to do the kissing thing in front of her. So then we went to the Methodist church and we put on a feast, and it was fabulous. And everybody had a great time. So we have been married since 2018. So that's 7 years, yeah. And then we've been together 21 years. So anybody got any questions about any of this craziness? Or what, were you going to do something?
Yeah.
Now that I got on a roll,
Yeah.
I'll get out of your
You
way.
anything else to read? Or?
No. I went off the script a long time ago.
Okay. Thank you all. Very, very relevant and personal stories. Really appreciate it. We do have a few minutes if anybody has any questions. Like I said, we are recording this meeting for people who want to either review it or haven't seen it, weren't able to be here tonight. We can also produce copies of people's exhibits A, B, C, and D, and the scripts, if y'all would like to have copies of those. So just let us know. Any questions, comments?
Please raise your hand. I'll bring the mic. Comments or questions, responses?
Okay, no comments. We will adjourn a few minutes early. Again, thank you for your participation. Thank you for who you are.